Welcome back to Flip the Tables, the podcast where we are challenging leadership trends, questioning our motives, and gently reminding ourselves that adding integrity into our mission statements does not, in fact, create that integrity. On today's episode, I'm sure you guessed, we are discussing character and integrity within leadership and how love leadership sits at the center of both. We will also be welcoming our next guest, Mr. Jack Brownfield, who you will learn is the embodiment of a leader with strong character and lives through integrity every single day. Unfortunately, in 2026, integrity just seems to be considered optional, a situation or something you just post about on LinkedIn after a scandal, while Jesus treated integrity like oxygen, a non-negotiable, something that is required within leadership. So let's start with defining character. Character is who you are when no one is watching, clapping, or refreshing your analytics dashboard. Crison, Zeitz, and Gans tell us that a leader's character drives trust, performance, and organizational health, which is followed up by Brown, who reminds us that vulnerability is what builds real trust. What's crazy is Scripture said this long before the Harvard Business Review made this trendy. In Proverbs 10:9, it reads, "A person of integrity acts with integrity, but a person whose ways are crooked will be found out." Let me translate that for you. You can curate your own reputation. What you cannot curate is your character. Now let's define integrity. Let's be honest. Integrity is typically unnatural, whereas self-preservation, self-promotion, and blaming the intern, those are all things that come natural. Integrity requires choosing truth when lies are more convenient. Trevino and Nelson tells us that leaders face constant pressure to compromise values through ethical decision-making. Shocking. Who knew that quarterly goals could tempt people? Jesus addressed this type of tension directly in Luke 16:10. Whoever is faithful in very little is also faithful in much. Integrity isn't built on platforms or titles. It's built in the unseen choices, the quiet moments, and yes, even in something as simple as an expense report. Because at the end of the day, people may hear what you say, but your actions will always tell the truth. Here's a radical claim. Love is not a soft skill. It is the root system of integrity. Jesus didn't separate love from righteousness. Matthew 23:37-39 reads like this: "Love the Lord your God. Love your neighbor as yourself." All leadership ethics hang on to these. Not compliance manuals, not brand values, but love. Chula tells leaders who demonstrate compassion and moral concern often foster more ethical cultures. It turns out people typically behave better when they are led by someone who actually cares about them. And apparently, that is some groundbreaking news. Now let's define love leadership again. Love leadership is choosing the good of others over the preservation of self. Yes, even when your ego files a formal complaint. Love leadership forms character through 3 simple steps. Number 1, love tells the truth. Ephesians 4:15 reads, "Speak the truth in love." Truth without love is cruelty. Love without truth is manipulation. Integrity, it requires both. Number 2, love chooses sacrifice over image. Jesus washed feet while leaders today struggle to refill the office coffee pot. Matthew 20:26 reads, "Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant." Number 3, love aligns private and public life. Proverbs 4:23 reads, "Above all, guard your heart." Integrity means the private calendar matches the public values, and the hidden habits match the spoken beliefs. 0 filters are available. And let's address the discomfort. Integrity feels unnatural because it requires dying to self. Matthew 16:25 reads, "Whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." Leadership translation: lose the need to be right, lose the need to be praised, and lose the need to win at every meeting. Hannah and Avalio tell us that moral courage shows that ethical action often does involve personal risk, which should not be a surprise. Of course it does. Integrity costs something. If it were easy, it would simply be called branding. So you may be asking yourself, how do you know love leadership is shaping your character? Let's count it down. Number 1, you apologize quickly. Proverbs 28:13, "Those who confess find mercy." Number 2, you give credit generously. Romans 12:10. Outdo one another in showing honor. Number 3. You make decisions that won't make sense to selfish people because love rarely optimizes for optics. Number 4. You're the same person in the meeting that you are in the mirror. Terrifying, liberating, and biblical. So here's the truth. Integrity isn't a leadership competency. It's a cruciform life. John 15:13 reads, Greater love has no one than this, to lay down his life for his friends. Love leadership is not soft. However, it is costly. It is inconvenient. It is deeply unnatural, which is exactly why it looks so much like Jesus. So if integrity feels hard, well, good. It means you're not confusing it with reputation. And if love feels costly, even better. You may be finding yourself finally leading. I'm excited to be welcoming our next guest this season to discuss character and integrity. Mr. Jack Brownfield has been a part of my life since around 12 or 13 years old. He came into my life as my AAU basketball coach, and his entire family turned into lifelong friends. They turned into my family. I learned through him that coaching to win wasn't everything, but pouring into the lives of those around you and investing in them is equally as important. Build the relationships. Know your people. Be yourself when you're around them and when you're not. He also proved that having a strong character and living a life built around integrity is the way to be successful. He is the embodiment of having strong character and living that life of integrity. Not only has he been an asset and a pillar in my life, but also my husband's life and my family. He was there for me in my darkest days, and he's been with me through every success. So help me welcome Mr. Jack Brownfield. Welcome to Flip the Tables. I'm so thankful and proud to have you here. Do you want to start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Jack Brownfield. Was born and raised in California for the first 13 years of my life before moving back to Tennessee. Been very involved in sports and athletics as a hobby. Have grown up the second half of my life in church, probably the first part of my life up until I was a teenager. I really wasn't much involved in Christianity. That's as much because where we lived in California at the time as anything. Once we moved to Tennessee, then we became very involved in church and that type of thing. I had a fairly significant physical trauma in my life. Just prior to my senior year, I broke my neck and had some serious issues with that, and there was potential facing death during my surgery, and that kind of changed perspectives for me. Sports had always been very important to me up till that point in time, and obviously once my neck was broken, surgeries were done and all those types of things, I no longer had that option left to me, so I had to kind of change my thinking on where I was going with my life and what I was going to do with my life, and in a lot of ways that single. So that event was very large in my life. From that time on, I was a bit more serious and thought things out a little bit better than I did as a younger, more rash person who was more focused on athletics than probably anything. I did get an education in chemistry, went on to work in the nuclear field for a while, and then I got very sick for a couple of years, which was again related to damage with my neck again. I went through a very tough time, newly married, away from home, having a lot of physical issues. Doctors weren't sure what my issues were completely and how to handle it. And so it was a tough 3 or 4 years. And again, just like the initial breaking of my neck, it caused me to really reflect and to realize that, we really are mortal people. We're not necessarily here for everybody's not going to grow old and get that opportunity. And for a long time, that's kind of what I thought. So there was a lot of things that shaped my life from moving from California with a different kind of society to Tennessee. There were a lot of leaders in my life because of sports. And I can honestly say that I saw very good leaders, very bad leaders. And that falls under a lot of reasons as to why those leaders were both good and bad. So with that being said, finished where I am in my life by saying I'm a grandfather, run a family business that I've been a part of for 37 years. I now own it. And pretty much everybody that works for me is either family or somebody that my parents mentored in church. So it's still pretty much a family organization, and we cover a wide territory. It's pretty technical, so there's a lot of stresses involved, but we work in a lot of team concepts where we work with contractors and engineers and owners and that type of thing to overcome water issues for big industry and large cities and that kind of thing. So we work in a kind of a team environment approach every day, and leadership, both from my part and from the parts of the other companies or the other firms involved, is also important.
Well, that's awesome. Let's jump right into the first question. When no one is watching, what guides your decisions, and how does that reveal your true leadership character?
That's really a good question. I know a lot of people who, especially in via athletics, who pretend to be one person as they lead on the court. Most of my coaches were in basketball or football, but mostly in basketball. And I know a lot of leaders that they pretended to be somebody they were when other adults were around, but when it was just us younger kids that they were coaching, that they were talking with or doing whatever their coaching activity was at the time, they tended to be quite a bit less than what they would show themselves to our parents. So they would do a lot of cursing, and they would try to come down to what they thought was interacting with us at our age, and just things that you don't necessarily want for your child to be led by. My view of leadership is that, especially in sports, because I hearken back to that a lot, especially in sports, is I want somebody to coach my kids, or when I'm coaching, somebody that's going to give those a perspective of, yes, I expect hard work. I expect you to listen. I want to lead, though, by being faithful in my approach. I don't curse. I don't, try to make myself sound like one of them by, saying stupid things or doing stupid things or immature things. I want to come across as, I am a faith-based person who has perspective and experience from years of my life, and I want to pass those on to people. I want them to understand that, you are always growing. And to that end, you have to be who you are all the time. You can't just be this one person when you're dealing with a team, and then another person when you're dealing with a group of people who are unassociated with it, and then another person when you're by yourself. If you're not that same person in all of those situations, then people begin to see that it's an act. And kids are good at discerning when you're acting. So I am the same person when I travel constantly, and sometimes with people in my business and sometimes by myself. And I'm going to be the same person whether I'm around people I know, don't know, no matter what that situation is going to be. I'm not going to change my actions and the way I come across. A lot of times I'm in situations with people who have no faith, and that can be tough because they are cursing and saying things and acting in a way that is not a way I would act. And, it's a business relationship and an issue at the same time. So you kind of have to be tactful in allowing that person to kind of get the message that you're not a person like that. You can't just slap them on the back every time they say something that's crude, or, or some crude action or some story that, is not a good story. You just kind of have to, lead by example and stick to your morality and your faith and your patience and hopefully your wisdom, and work yourself through those situations. And those are the ones that are always challenging to me. I don't have any problem with being, a person that, is the same no matter where I'm at. I'm going to be that person, and whether people like it or not, that's who I am. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It just means that I do act via my faith and experiences, and I try to have people understand that that's where I'm coming from, and that to me should build a level of trust, at least in my own experiences and in life and in business. It generally has been my experience that people of faith who actually live that faith will tend to be able to pick up on those subtle things from other people and kind of morph around that and try to get that person that may not be understanding my perspective on faith to at least understand that I'm not coming from their lifestyle view. And that could be
Yeah.
that can be a challenge, but it's like one time my guys and I were on the road and we had a little time to kill, and we went into a store, and when I checked out, they missed a very large item, and I realized when I got to the vehicle and I put the bag down and I went to put the receipt away, that they had missed the large item. And I said that, and one of my guys said, "Well, there's you a free one." And I said, "No, that's not a free one. I'm going to go back in and show them that they missed it and pay for it." And they were like, "Why would you do that? That's their problem. They missed." And I said, "Well, yeah, they did miss, but that doesn't mean I have to take advantage of it. It doesn't mean that I have to, feed into that. And that person may have to, at the end of the day, pay for that mistake when they're, doing whatever they do to get their registers and everything to meet up at the end of the day." So I took that back in, and I think that really, this one person's perspective really kind of said, "Wow, that's a very different approach than I would have taken." And I think they really thought about that, because they asked me about it a couple times. So it's those simple things that aren't real big that people see. And people see you're always going to have somebody around that is watching you in a business sense to determine what kind of person you are and establish whether they can trust you and depend upon you. And I think most people can tell a truth faithful person, and that tends to lead them to trust them more. Does me. And maybe that's not absolute, but it is the way I view it. I tend to view people who are faith based in what they're doing and how they live more than those that aren't. And that doesn't always apply. There are very good people who aren't Christians, but they it doesn't ever hurt, even with a very good person, to kind of put those faith-based beliefs out there for them as well. So
Yeah.
my answer
You never
would
know
be
what little nugget.
that is exactly right. You don't know what little thing that you may or may not do becomes the example for somebody, positively or negatively. And that's why you have to live that life of faith, but you also have to be patient. You have to understand that people have different, they come from different backgrounds. They don't have the same experiences. So when you're trying to be the person you really are, you have to have patience, and you have to kind of read the room as to where you go with that, because certain people will see somebody of what they believe is really somebody of faith, and because they don't have faith, they will literally try to create a conflict with you because of it. I've actually had that happen a few times. And I think how you handle that conflict that they throw up, and you kind of can tell that it's something they're throwing up because they don't like your lifestyle because it clashes with theirs. You can typically tell that that's the reason they're doing it. And the way to handle that is through maturity and the Lord's teachings and just kind of go from there.
What you've been discussing kind of connects the third question, which was in what ways can small compromises in character erode trust in a team and organization? Because you've always got those eyes on you, whether you're a coach or a leader, a parent, grandparent, there's someone always watching you to see how you handle conflict or mistakes or hard times. I mean, and then, God's always watching us too, just to see how we handle what has been thrown at us. And so, like, I've started looking at those things as little tests of faith and how I can best model how to handle those things for my kids and now for the people that I lead, because they see when stuff comes at me at work, how I handle it, the criticism that happens and how it's handled is, so I'm always like, okay, well, they're watching me, so I've got to handle this right. And, just really think about it before acting.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. One of the things you have to do as a leader is be constant in the way that you do handle those events. You can't be scattered. You cannot open the door to those that are watching you and say, okay, say in my business, there are a lot of times when we'll be working with a utility or something, and in the opportunity to sell equipment and take care of a problem, a owner will kind of expect some under the table payments of some sort or another for choosing your equipment and buying your equipment. And my guys have seen that happen before and with me, and my response to that is always very much the same. And it has cost me sales in front of them and cost me projects in front of them. But fundamentally, if I have to buy your business and buy my relationship with you, then you're really probably not somebody that I want to do business with, because you're going to be open to other issues that aren't going to be positive. I will pretty much say in those situations, well, if our support and our integrity and our professionalism and our quality of our equipment, all of those things aren't enough to sway you into wanting to work with us, then you probably need to find somebody else, because those are the reasons that I would want to do business with somebody, is that I felt like, A, I could trust them, B, they were going to support whatever the situation is we were going to talk about. They'd always be there to take care of the situation if the equipment had a problem or there were technical issues or whatever. And I would want to know that the reason that I selected that person was because I knew that they were going to support it, not because they had taken money from me or, I had taken money from them. Because that's not that there is no good relationship that comes from that kind of activity. So my guys have seen me pretty much just absolutely bypass that, and we've lost projects here and there because of that. We make mistakes. I make mistakes. And when I make a mistake, that sometimes has some painful monetary consequences with it, because I won't make an excuse for it and I won't back out of it. And my guys have seen me say, look, I made a mistake here. I didn't understand all of the technical things that were going to be involved, and I've missed some part of it, and that's creating an issue. We're going to do what we need to do to make it right, because we did miss it. It's nobody's fault but our own, and go from there. And those are tough. People have a very hard time in admitting that they've made mistakes. And if those mistakes cost their business or themselves money, they really try to avoid that. But
Yeah.
if you're not a person of integrity at that point, then you're going to lose that person as a customer anyway. So in my book, So you need to do the right thing because it's the right thing. And I think in the end, your customer will respect you more anyway. And the people around you see that you are willing to admit you made mistakes and accept the consequences, so that makes them a little less apt to try and maybe lie their way through a situation that they've screwed up in business with. Because I have the same view of them. They may make mistakes that they didn't fully understand, and we'll support that mistake just like we would support mine. In sports, as you know, you and I coached a college women's basketball team, and it was a very diverse bunch of young ladies coming from all sorts of backgrounds and with all sorts of different beliefs. And I believe that you and I both did our utmost to try to portray that we were faithful people, B, that we would treat everybody the same. Whether you were the star of the team or the last person on the bench, you didn't get special treatment. You got the same treatment. And I think people see that as really something that is missing today, because people tend to, I don't want to say worship, but they tend to fawn or give people who are stars or better in their particular endeavor, in this case basketball, better treatment than they do the person at the end of the bench. Coaches will let them get away with, things that are against team policy, from a conduct to a grade to anything, and then they'll hold the person at the end of the bench to the utmost strict nature of whatever the action is.
Yeah.
And people see that, and I think a true teammate or a true team member says to themselves, I really don't like that I'm on a team where the star gets treated one way and I get treated another. Or they say to themselves, I really don't like watching people get treated in different ways. I think it should be consistent. We all have the same expectations of what we've got to do to be members of the team, so we should all be treated the same. And I've always tried to accomplish that. And I've always tried to bolster people's self-image of themselves. If they have a lack of confidence on the court, you and I both know players that played for us that, just kind of were like, I'm just going to sit here on the corner of the court and do what I need to do to give the ball to the stars of the team and do my part. And we were never of that part. We were like, no, if you've got a wide open shot, you take it just like the star does. And if you have the opportunity to go to the basket, you do that. You don't have to wait for you to get the ball to the star. Your team is always better if everybody's involved at the same level and has the same expectation that their leader will treat them the same from that approach. If you know that somebody's going to get better treatment than you are for doing either the same wrong thing or the same right thing, you'll never have the confidence with that team or with that leader, because you know that you're never going to be treated the same way. So it's hard to determine how your actions are going to be interpreted or looked at by the coach or the boss or whatever. So I think it's really crucial that you treat everybody equal. And that's not just a team concept. It can be in your office. It can be, okay, I'm the president of, in your case, in some kind of educational approach. You were involved in recruitment a lot of the time, and you made decisions about people and how to best get them there and that kind of thing. And I'm sure the people that worked for you or with you saw what you were trying to do. And if they agreed or they didn't agree, if they felt like they could come to you, that's one thing. If they thought that they couldn't come to you if they disagreed and you just dismissed them, that's a difficult thing for people to look at leadership. It's also a difficult thing if you treat the vice president, you're the president of something and you treat the vice president in one way, but you treat the secretary in a very, offhanded manner and don't seem to have respect for their job or what they're doing or their efforts, even if they're very good. It's kind of like you just take it for granted. It doesn't matter. That doesn't foster leadership either.
And I've seen that firsthand and just how it drains people. And it's kind of the whole point of this podcast and the name of it, Flip the Tables, because having leaders like you in my life getting to coach alongside, but also you helping me at a young age build confidence on the court, because I also wanted to stand in the corner, has pushed me to be, I hope, a better leader and to flip the tables on all of these bad leaders, because seeing how it drains people and kind of crushes their spirits, and not even just mentally and emotionally, but physically, like seeing people physically sick because of how someone has led them is just, I'm fed up with it. And so
I would completely agree with you. I have seen that exact thing in play, both in sports and in business, where people had a different perspective than their leader in this case. Because I work with a lot of different companies on on any given project. So we'll deal with the contractor, the engineer, the owner, and all of us will be in these meetings and we'll be trying to come up with a solution that's, cost effective, cost efficient, but also takes care of maybe a highly technical issue that maybe involves the public safety when it comes to water, or, big fines for not meeting regulations on water or something like that. I see a lot of engineering firms where the lead engineer is very stern with those under them and they're very impatient and they take advantage of their higher position by kind of shutting down a person when they have an idea or a thought different to them, or sometimes they just even get mad if one of their people has an idea that's different than them and brings it up.
yeah.
And, when you do that, you kill off that thought in the lower level person of trying to do your job and trying to come up with the best solution, because you realize that unless you just go along with whatever your boss wants, you're going to be penalized one way or another.
Yeah.
You're going to be made to look bad. That is truly not a way to mentor or lead. You need to allow people to fully express their ideas and to come up with solutions, or whatever you may be facing. You need to allow them to have input, because if you allow them even a small input on a problem earlier in their career, then as time goes on, they feel more and more comfortable with coming up with bigger solutions and more input. And you may have somebody that's very, very talented, and because you've let them express that talent in small but growing ways, even if it doesn't necessarily follow your thinking and you are the leader, but you can see that they really are working at it and some of their ideas have been good, and you do give them that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people look for in a leader, is just to allow them to express themselves, and not be subjected to, oh, well, you don't have any say, you don't have any experience, you don't have any knowledge, you don't have my knowledge, which is what a lot of leaders or bosses will say. Well, I've had the experience, I have president by my name, that makes my decisions always right. That's not being a leader. A leader is letting people's talents come out and fostering those talents to come out.
Yeah. An example with a guy I work with now, he loves airplanes. And so he's like, if I'm flying an airplane and I'm about to crash into a mountain and my co-pilot is so afraid to tell me were about to die and crash into the mountain because of how I have led him to believe that I'm always right. He said, "What kind of leader does that make me? I'm literally flying into my death." He was like, "I need someone to tell me when I am wrong."
That is an excellent example, and I see that kind of thing where some leaders will have an absolute impossible ability to admit that they're wrong or to allow people to think that they're wrong. And so they'll do whatever it takes, blame it on somebody else, blame the issue on something else, and it's like I said earlier, you as a leader, when you accept and admit that you've made mistakes, that allows your people to say, hey, he made a mistake. And he accepted it and he admitted it. So I guess if I'm in that same situation, he'll allow me to, the same grace. And that gives them that ability to step out and take chances and to kind of feel more free to input into whatever the issue is because they know that they won't be penalized for whatever their opinion or their thought process. But it is those small things that all build up to a person trusting you and knowing that your heart's in the right place. Even though you make mistakes, you're willing to admit it. And I just deal with because I deal with chemists and engineers and, doctors and engineering and that kind of thing. I deal with a lot of people who believe that their title entitles them to more importance in not being questioned. And I'm not influenced by that. I'm a chemist, that's my background, my education. But quite honestly, you learn more in life from experience, doing whatever it is you do for as a job. You learn more in that than you ever did educationally for that specific job. I don't know of any job other than maybe education itself where you don't learn more from doing than from a book. And you have to express to people that that's, solutions come from because, if you're stuck 10 years ago with when you were getting your education and you're only looking at things that were, acceptable at the time of getting your education, well, technology moves on. And so if you're not open to the experiences of the new technologies in our business, at least, and you're stuck in the old world, then solutions are a lot harder to come by. And, when I went to college, you used to have to write your own programs for a computer to work. You had COBOL or Fortran or something like that, and you literally wrote code to make the computer do what you wanted it to do. Now you have all these applications and all these things that are done by people that are trying, that are specialized in that and are trying to make your life easier. Although, just as a side note, I hate AI. It is very much an experience driven world, and my business is very much experience driven as to coming up with solutions and handling problems. And you have to be open to those solutions. You have to let people run with their thinking and their thoughts, and you have to be open to new thinking and new solutions. Everybody that works for me is half my age. And so they come at it from a different background, a different experience in school, a different experience in life with technology, phones, and all the things that I didn't have when we were in college. And so you have to be open to those kinds of things.
I guess I'll just ask, is there any last words of encouragement to leaders to lead with character and integrity, or just anything in general?
Well, quite honestly, I don't think you can be a good leader without having integrity. I don't believe you can be a good leader without including faith in that. There would be a lot of people who would say, well, there's not a place for faith in that, in your business? And I would say, yes, there is. We always started practices and games with prayers and that kind of thing because we believed in that. That was important to us. And we didn't do it because we were trying to impress anybody, because I'm sure some of the people we were asking to pray before practices or pray before games probably were like non-believers to begin with. But by showing that we believed and we followed that belief, I think opens up those that are following you to say, well, maybe there is something to that. Maybe you got to look into this and be a little bit more open to it. If you just avoid it as a leader, then you're not leading people to that, and so I think integrity is important. Faith is obviously important, and being who you are and treating people all equally from an input standpoint and from an importance standpoint is very important. And just listening. There's a lot of leaders who don't know how to listen. And so listening is really important, and acting as if you care what the person's saying and not just, yeah, I'm listening, but I'm dismissing it and I'm thinking about something else while you're talking.
Right.
And you and I have both been with people like that. Uh, and you just get to where you're like, well, I'm not going to input into this because it's just going to be dismissed or laughed at, or somebody's going to shoot holes in my idea or whatever. So you have to foster that with patience, integrity, experience, and you do have to, at times when people are just wrong, you have to explain to them how they're wrong. But unless it's something very large, you have to also say that's part of life, is to make mistakes. And you have to be willing to admit that you make the mistakes and suffer the consequences in front of people as well. That would be the ground rules I would have for what I would think would be a leader's starting abilities. Because you like everybody else, you grow as a leader. You don't stay the same. If you stay the same, then you're not growing from your mistakes or other people's mistakes, or from seeing other leaders do things that are positive and are helping their companies to be successful or their teams to be successful. There's a lot of things that go into leadership, and boy, I've read books on leadership and that kind of thing, and to a large degree, typically the books that I read, I thought were more limiting than I wanted to be. Yeah. As far as what a leader would allow people to do. They were more like, you have to be firm and stand your ground and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, yeah, you do have to do those things, but you also have to be open and allow people to have freedom to think and think for themselves, or you don't gain from their abilities or their talents. And, there's a lot of that's missed.
I think that's where I come up with this, probably what some people think is a crazy idea of love leadership, because if you start with the love, like have that in your heart as a leader for the people that you're leading, you're going to meet them where they are and not necessarily expect them to conform to what you need as a leader. It puts a lot of demand on the leader.
That's true.
As a leader, if you're going to go that route, it's not easy, but
it is not. You have to make decisions that are uncomfortable to you, not necessarily bad or anything, but just you have to let people go in a way that you don't completely understand on the front end.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is very tough.
And I think like you said, the books you read, and that's how I feel about the theories that I've had to study, was they're all just kind of like all in these little boxes and no way out. Like you have to choose, but then reading those and then the scripture, and I'm like, no. Jesus did not do that. Like that is not his basis and foundation was the love for his people. I mean, he came, walked the earth for years and then died for us all. If that's not love, I don't know. I don't know what is. And so why have modern leaders decided that that's a little too hard? So I'm just going to build this one little box and lead this way. And this is what
That's
I'm
true.
sticking to. And so now I'm kind of, I guess, flipping the tables of that, flipping their boxes, jumbling them up.
And that's flipping the table is a very good title for your approach and for your series, because that's really what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to, if you're truthfully believe you're a good leader, A, you should have confidence in who you hire, and B, if you had confidence in hiring them, then you should also have confidence in allowing them to do what they can do.
Right.
There are definitely those who will do the least that they can do to make a living.
Yeah.
And, you do have those people out there, and you have them mixed in with the people that really want to make a difference and really want to do a good job. And you just have to find the right person. And sometimes it takes a while, or sometimes you have to kind of do exactly what we've been talking about, be a leader.
Yeah.
And lead them into being the person that they, in general terms, need to be to make it in the job force and in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That's right.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any closing words before we close out?
I think I've pretty much said it. Lead with your heart, lead with your head, and lead with, the things that the Lord has put in front of you and the examples that he's put in front of you. And while you'll make mistakes, I don't think you'll go wrong as a general practice.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on here and being one of my guests and being one of the probably most influential leaders in my life. So,
well, I appreciate that. You really don't know how much, when I hear something like that, it means to me.
Yeah.
Because we all want to be positive people in people's lives. And, just even if it's just one person that you make a difference in, that's very, very beneficial. So I'm glad you're doing this series. I've been watching some of it. Kim and I have watched it. I thought a few times, well, that's a unique thought process. And, again, it's unique. Is it right? Could you be open to it? And those are the things that you have to make as a leader. So you're just sitting there and you're saying, well, this is actually kind of edifying and kind of makes you think there's different approaches and there's different ways. So I appreciate it. And anything I can do for you, as always, let me know.
Thank you so much.
All right, Beth, you have a good day.
You too. Bye.
All right, bye.
I want to give a big thanks for you guys sticking with me through this episode and hearing from one of the most influential people I've had the opportunity to be around in this life, to learn from, to grow, and that remains in my corner to this day with encouragement and wisdom. Character and integrity are not just personal values. They are the foundation of every leadership legacy we leave behind. Who we are, not just what we do, sets the tone for every room that we walk into, every team that we lead, and every life we impact. At the end of the day, people may follow your title for a season, but they won't trust your character for a lifetime. Character and integrity doesn't exist in a vacuum. They are tested, refined, and revealed in the context of people. So to leave you with this question, what does integrity look like when what one generation values, another one questions? This is where love leadership steps in. Love is the bridge that character builds and integrity protects, allowing us to lead with conviction without losing compassion, and to create environments where every generation feels seen, valued, and understood. Hopefully by now you've picked up on where our next conversation is leading. Generational gaps. We're not just talking about differences, but opportunities. An opportunity to lead boldly, love deeply, and unify what is typically divided with ease. The strongest leaders are not the ones who pick a side, but the ones who build the bridge. So join me here next week as we dive into generational gaps, from boomers to Gen Z in the workforce. We will be welcoming not one, but two guests, Mr. Patrick McElhaney, who will be representing our Gen X, and Mr. Cooper Hunt, who will be representing our Gen Z, while yours truly will be filling in that millennial gap. So same time, same platforms. This is Flip the Tables. I'm Bethany Brady, and we are leading differently.